Good to have you once again. Right about now, I shall be looking at types of speciation in our ongoing discuss. Speciation we've established, that is the formation of new species, the process by which new species are formed. Okay, so there are different ways or pathway through which that could happen. We just want to look at them quickly. One is something we call allopatric speciation. Okay, allopatric speciation. In Greek, allos just means like other than patra, like fatherland or something. So allopatric speciation is a speciation that comes from complete separation of members of previously the same population, some species, complete geographic separation. So when there is a geographic barrier, this could be a river, this could be a mountain range, this could be some canyon, this could be a valley, this could be water. Okay, animals on different islands, they are separated geographically from others. And in fact, speaking of islands, we know that most of the islands, they have uniquely looking animals. That's basically because of this concept of allopatric speciation. Because they've been separated, the islands were cut off during continental drift or volcanic formation, and then they were separated from the mainland. And then and the animals there began to develop unique patterns, unique looks, unique characteristics that distinguish them considerably from those of the mainland. This was the fascination of Charles Darwin when he visited in his famous tour the Komodo Island or the Galapagos Islands. He reported seeing different kinds of finches, birds on different. Let us say this is Island 1, and this is Island 2, and this is Island 3. Okay, so according to Darwin, from his observation, he saw finches, this group of birds, and then maybe on one island, the finch had a beak like this. On another island, the finch had a shorter beak. On another island, the finch he saw here had a curvy beak. Just example, okay? So, but he could tell from his visual appraisal that these were all finches. Okay, so thinking that they ought to be of the same species, but later on, he was shocked to learn that there were actually different species, you know. And species, the concept of species is a group of animals, they mate among themselves, they can't mate with the other one naturally. All right, so they don't mate with those ones. So the ones on island A are now distinct from those of island B and those of island C. But it was clearly visible to him that they were pretty much the same finches. So they underwent speciation. So it was that fascination and those observations on that mission of his that made him to begin to nurse and bring out concepts such as the origin of species and all of that. So allopatric speciation is one that is brought about by complete geographic isolation of members of the species. Then each of the groups now gets adapted to its own newfound lands, and then gets adapted to it, develop unique characteristics. The genotype interact with the environment, and then that animal now kind of begins to diverge. The two populations begin to diverge so much that peradventure you bring them together again by chance, they are no longer able to mate, or the willingness to mate is simply not there. In that case, they have formed two different species. So geography is a major key factor there, bringing about a complete separation. Then we have peripatric speciation. In this concept of speciation, you have animals in the same location. Let us say maybe the same location, just a piece of land. Then let us say that suddenly the animals in this angle, this edge of the land here, prefer to mate among themselves. and they are not mating with the ones here. They are on the edge. Those on the edge, the populations on the periphery, on the edge, now began to mate among themselves and develop unique characteristics that eventually, gradually begins to separate them or distinguish them from the larger population. That process is a peripatric speciation that is taking place. All right. And then we have the other one, which is a parapatric. Parapatric. In parapatric speciation, you have animals living in about the same location, quite okay, but there's a kind of a partial geographic separation. Partial, not completely. Let us say this is the piece of land where they are found, and then there is some kind of partial separation here. Some group of animals are here. This is fatherland B, and this is fatherland A. There's a partial separation. Partial because the animals here can still mix with the ones here occasionally. Okay, occasionally they can interact, occasionally they can breed, but generally, because of this partial separation, the reluctance, there's a reluctance, and then these ones prefer to be restricted over here, while the other ones to do their business over here. And after some time, characteristics begin to diverge. This begins to emerge into some form of uniqueness, and then some uniqueness will begin to emerge over here. So all of that accumulation of uniqueness brings about speciation in this setting, which is parapatric. All right. So the last one here is sympatric. Okay, this might be a little bit weird and strange, but in sympatric speciation, there's no form of physical barrier at all. There's no complete barrier. There is no edge. There is no partial. You know, the animals are living in the same location, okay, and mixing up pretty much. However, there's a reproductive separation, isolation. That's what takes place here. Unlike here that you talk about physical isolation, here is more of a reproductive isolation. Though the animals are mixing together, but somehow, there are some certain group reproductively begin to isolate themselves, begin to discriminate or refuse to mate with the others and prefer their own kind for whatever reason that kind comes up. So let's just say, for example, you have some group of flies in a certain area, and then before now they all lay their eggs on a certain variety of a fruit, falling fruits from a certain variety of a tree, and then they lay their eggs, and suddenly, for no reason, some among them now lay their eggs on another variety of a fruit, another fruit of a different kinds of plant, and their eggs still hatch. And then the young ones that came from that different plant or fruit, after maturity, they began to associate only with their kind that were hatched from, fruit B. And then when they are of adulthood, they want to also go into reproductive behavior. They go back again and lay their eggs on the same fruit B. And then, though they are mixing up with the others in the population, but certainly they know their kind. They are the ones that are hatched from fruit B, while the predominant members of the rest of the population were hatched from fruit A. So if fruit B and fruit B do all the playing, do all the fighting, do everything together, exception of mating, then there is a reproductive isolation. And that kind of speciation that is taking place that way is called a sympatric speciation. I hope you understand that. Don't forget to like the channel and share, and also make your comment. Be glad to hear from you.